Hello, fourth graders. Welcome to Wednesday's Maniac Magee, chapters 26 through 29 today. It was impossible to listen to such stories empty handed. As soon as Grayson started one, Maniac would reach into one of the equipment bags and pull out a ball or a bat or a catcher's mitt. Sniffing the scuffed horsehide aroma of the ball, rippling the fingertips over the red stitching, it's hard to say how these things can make the listening better, but they do. And for Maniac, they did. And of course, as happens with baseball, one thing led to another, and pretty soon the two of them were tossing a ball back and forth. And then they were outside where the throws could be longer, where you could play pepper on the outfield grass of the Legion field, the old man pitching, the kid tapping grounders, where you could shag fungos, the old man popping high flyers, the kid chasing them down. And now the stories were mixed with instruction. The grizzled rickety coot showing the kid how to spray liners to the opposite field, how to get a jump on a long fly even before the batter hits it, how to throw the curveball. Stiff, crooked fingers that grappled clumsily with crimpet wrappers curled naturally around the shape of a baseball. With the ball in his hand, the park handyman became a professor. As to the art of pitching, of course, the old man could show and tell, but he could no longer do. Except for one pitch, the only one left in his repertoire from the old days. He called it the stop ball, and it nearly drove Maniac goofy. The old man claimed he discovered the stop ball one day down in the Texas League, and that he was long gone from baseball when he perfected it. Unlike most pitches, the stop ball involved no element of surprise. On the contrary, the old man would always announce it. "Okay," he'd call in from the mound. "Here she comes. Now keep an eye on her, 'cause she's going to float on up there, and just about the time she's over the plate, she's going to stop. Now, nobody else ever hit it, so don't you go getting upset if you don't neither. It's no shame to whiff on the stop ball." And then he'd throw it. Well, of course, Maniac knew that most, if not all, of that was blarney, and just to make sure, he watched the ball extra carefully. There sure didn't seem to be anything unusual about it, not at first, anyway. But as the ball came closer, it did somehow seem to get more and more peculiar. And by the time it reached the plate, it might just as well have stopped, because Maniac never knew if he was swinging at the old man's pitch or at his speech. Whatever, in weeks of trying, he never hit it out of the infield. It was October. The trees rimming the outfield were flaunting their colors. The kid and the geezer baseballed their lunchtimes away and the after dinner times and weekends. And every night, as the old man left for his room at the Y, he would grouse, "You ought to go to school." And one night the kid said back, "I do." And that's how the old man found out what the kid was doing with his mornings. He had noticed the books before, rows and piles of them that kept growing. But there being books, he didn't think much of it. Now the kid tells him, "You know the money you give me?" Each morning he gave the kid 50 cents or $1 to get himself some crimpets. "Well, I take it up to the library. Right inside the door, they have these books they're selling, cases of them, old books they don't want anymore. They only cost 5 or 10 cents apiece." He pointed to the piles. "I buy them." He showed them to the old man. Ancient, back-broken math books, flaking travel books, warped spellers, mangled mysteries, biographies, music books, astronomy books, cookbooks. "What's the matter?" said the old man. "Can't you make up your mind what kind you want?" The kid laughed. "I want them all." He threw his hands out. "I'm learning everything." He opened one of the books. "Look, geometry, triangles. Okay, isosceles triangles. These two legs, they look equal to you?" The old man squinted. He nodded. "Okay, but can you prove it?" The old man studied the triangle for a full minute. "If I had a ruler, maybe." No ruler. The old man sighed. "Guess I give up." So the kid proved it. Absolutely dead center proved it. 2 days later, while playing pepper in the Legion infield, the old man said to the kid, "So, Why don't you go ahead and teach me how to read? Grayson doesn't know how to read. Chapter 27. The story he told now was not about baseball. It was about parents who neglected him and left him alone a lot, about being put in classes where they just cut paper and played games all day, about a teacher who whispered to a principal just outside the classroom door, "This bunch will never learn to read a stop sign." Right then and there, as if to make the teacher right, he stopped trying. The part I didn't tell you about Bluefield, I was only 15. I ran away. The kid and the old man climbed into the pickup. They made 3 stops. First, they stopped by the park office at the zoo, where Grayson told the superintendent he just wanted to work part-time for a while, in the afternoons. "Fine," said the superintendent, "just so you don't expect to get paid full-time." Then they went to the library book sale racks and bought about 20 old picture books, such as The Story of Babar and Mike Mulligan's Steam Shovel and The Little Engine That Could. Then they went to Woolworth's for a small portable blackboard and a piece of chalk. Within 3 days, Grayson had the alphabet down pat, the shapes, the sounds. After a week, he could read 10 one-syllable words, but he was reading them from memory. It took another couple of weeks before he began to get the hang of sounding out words he had never seen before. The old man showed an early knack for consonants. Sometimes he got M and N mixed up, but the only one that gave him trouble day in and day out was C. It reminded him of a bronc some cowboy dared him to ride in his Texas League days. He would saddle up that C, climb aboard, and grip the pommel for dear life, and old C, more often than not, it would throw him. Whenever that happened, he'd just climb right back on and ride her some more. Pretty soon, C saw who was boss and gave up the fight. But even at their orneriest, consonants were fun. Vowels were something else. He didn't like them, and they didn't like him. There were only 5 of them, but they seemed to be everywhere. Why, you could go through 20 words without bumping into some of the shyer consonants, but it seemed as if you couldn't tiptoe past a syllable without waking up a vowel. Consonants, you knew pretty much where they stood, but you could never trust a vowel. To the old pitcher, they were like his own best knuckleball come back to haunt him. In, out, up, down. Not even the pitcher, much less the batter, knew which way it would break. He kept swinging and missing. But the kid was a good manager, and tough. He would never let him slink back to the showers, but kept sending him back up to the plate. The kid used different words, but in his ears the old minor leaguer heard, "Keep your eye on it. Hold your swing. Watch it all the way in. Don't be anxious. Just make contact." And soon enough, that's what he was doing, nailing those vowels on the button, writing them from consonant to consonant, syllable to syllable, word to word. One day the kid wrote on the blackboard, "I see the ball." And the old man studied it a while and said, slowly, gingerly, "I see the ball." Maniac whooped. "You're reading!" "I'm reading!" yipped the old man. His smile was so wide he'd have had to break it into sections to fit it through the doorway. Chapter 28. The first book Grayson read cover to cover was The Little Engine That Could. It took almost an hour and was the climax to a long evening of effort. At the end, the old man was sweating and exhausted. The kid's reaction surprised him. He didn't jump and yippee like he did after the first sentence. He just stayed in the far corner, seated on a stuffed and lumpy equipment bag. He had kept his distance all during the reading. Let Grayson know that there would be no cheating. He had to do it on his own. Now he was just staring at Grayson, a small smile coming over his face. And now he was making a fist and clenching it toward Grayson, and he said, "Amen." "What's that?" Amen. What's that for? Who prayed? I learned it in the church I used to go to. You don't have to wait for a prayer. You say it when somebody says something or does something you really like. He hopped off the bag, thrust both hands to the ceiling, and shouted, Amen! And suddenly the kid was hugging him, squeezing with a power you never suspected was in that little body, unless you had seen him pull a baseball almost to the trees in dead center field. Okay, said Maniac, clapping his hands. What'll it be? I'll be the cook. Whatever you want. Maniac had a toaster oven now. Compliments of his whiskered friend. In fact, little by little, Grayson had brought him a lot of things. A chest of drawers for his clothes, a space heater, a 2-foot refrigerator, hundreds of paper dishes and plastic utensils, blankets, a mat to sleep on, which the kid ignored, preferring the chest protectors. In time, the place was homier than his own room at the Y. How about a corn muffin? Said Grayson, choosing something easy on his bad teeth and aching gums. Maniac went to the bookcase that served as the pantry. One corn muffin coming up. Toasted? Yeah, why not? Butter? Sure, butter. Something to drink with that, sir? Nah, muffin's enough. The apple juice is excellent, sir. It was a great year for apples. Live it up, thought Grayson. Yeah, okay, apple juice. Coming right up, sir. After the snack, the kid proved himself as good a mind reader as a cook. Why don't you stay overnight? He said. It's late. While he groused about so preposterous an idea, the kid laid down the mat he never used, bulldogged him down to it, pulled off his shoes, and draped a blanket over him. He protested. This is supposed to be yours. The kid patted his chest protectors. I'm okay. I'm okay. And he knew that was the truth of it. The old man gave himself up willingly to his exhaustion and drifted off like a lazy sky-high fly ball. Something deep in his heart, unmeasured by his own consciousness, soared unburdened for the first time in 37 years, since the time he had so disgraced himself before the Mudhen Scout and named himself thereafter a failure. The blanket was there, but it was the boy's embrace that covered and warmed him. When somebody does something you really like. Amen, the old man whispered into the cornmeal and baseball-scented darkness. Chapter 29. For most of November, Winter toyed with Two Mills, whispered in its ear, tickled it under the chin. On Thanksgiving Thursday, Winter kicked it in the stomach. But that didn't stop the old man and the boy from joining the 10,000 who thronged to the stadium on the boulevard to see the traditional high school football game. The Arctic air laid panes of ice over the crayfish edge pools of Stony Creek. The effect was the opposite on human noses. Maniacs and Graysons ran like faucets, and not a handkerchief in sight. They deputized their sleeves and grabbed handfuls of napkins from the refreshment stand. Two Mills won the game, thanks to a last-minute 73-yard touchdown pass from quarterback Dennehy to James hands down. From the instant his old trash-talking Sandlot pal cradled the ball in his long brown fingers, Maniac was jumping on his seat, screaming trash at Hans's pursuers every step to the goal line, and glancing about to make sure Mrs. Beale wasn't hearing. By the time they got back to the baseball room, they were nearly frozen. But the freeze was good, for it made the warmth of the little apartment all the more welcome. Within 15 minutes, the space heater had the place positively tropical, while in the toaster oven, their 5-pound Thanksgiving chicken was already beginning to brown. A pair of hot plates and a squad of pots were pressed into action, and by mid-afternoon the two were sitting down to a feast of roast chicken, gravy, cranberry sauce, applesauce, SpaghettiOs, raisins, pumpkin pie, and butterscotch crimpets. Maniac thought of Thanksgivings past, of sitting around a joyless table, his aunt and uncle as silent and lifeless as the mammoth bird they gnawed on. He said grace. Dear God, we want to take this opportunity to thank you for the best Thanksgiving dinner we ever had. Well, I ever had. I guess I shouldn't speak for my friend Grayson. He peeked across the table. Grayson, he whispered, is this your best one too? The old man opened one eye. He shrugged. Don't know. Ain't tasted it yet. Maniac glared, rolled his eyes upward, hissed. Grayson? The old man flinched. Yeah. He squinted, one-eyed at the chicken. Yeah, I guess it is. The best, Maniac prompted. The best. Maniac went on. And we want to thank you for this warm house and for our own little family here and for Grayson learning to read. He's already read 13 books, as I'm sure you already know. And one more thing. If you could find some way to let the Beale family know I'm wishing them a happy Thanksgiving, I'd really appreciate it. They're the ones on 728 Sycamore Street, in case there's any other Beales around. Amen. Amen, said Grayson. They stuffed themselves silly, then collapsed and listened to polka music. Grayson had brought over a record player a week before, along with his entire music collection, 31 polka records. Grayson loved polkas. Of course, one can't listen to polka music for long before getting up and dancing, which is what the two Thanksgivers did as soon as their bloated stomachs allowed. They danced and they laughed, record after record. Whether it was the polka that they danced is another question. It was nearly dark, both of them having recollapsed, when Maniac said, Is there any paint around? Guess so, said Mason. Grayson, what for? You'll see. Can you get some? And a brush? The old man dragged himself up. What color? How about black? 5 minutes later, the old man was back. Got brown. That do? Fine, said Maniac. He opened the can, stirred the paint, put a jacket on, grabbed the brush, and went outside. Grayson followed. He watched the kid paint on the outside of the door in careful strokes. 101. Maniac stepped back, admiring his work. 101, he proclaimed. 101 Bandshell Boulevard. He's got an address again. That's it for chapters 26 through 29. Bye.